So you want an MT07. For a long time, this was the easiest decision you could make as a rider. If you wanted the most smiles per mile on a middleweight naked bike, you bought an MT07. It was really as simple as that. It nailed the trifecta perfectly. It was fun, cheap, and bulletproof reliable. Light and playful enough to be unintimidating, but punchy enough to pop some baby wheelies and experience some real thrills. It was made to meet the moment. It did for the 2010s what the SV650 did for the 2000s. It set the expectation for what the category should be with its 270-degree parallel twin, punchy low end, and just enough chaos to keep things interesting. Everyone else saw how successful Yamaha was with the MT07, and they followed suit. But that's the problem. That was then, and this is now, because this bike came out over 10 years ago. The segment is now stacked with competition from Suzuki, Honda, and even Triumph. They all caught on, and in a lot of ways, they've surpassed the MT07. Now, Yamaha saw the writing on the wall and hit the MT07 with its biggest update ever for the 2025 model year. But it still begs the question, was it enough? Or is the bike that now defined the category officially past its prime? Now, before we get into what has changed on this bike and how it stacks up against the stiff competition, we have to talk about what the MT07 actually is and why it's so important. For a long time, this bike was built around the idea that you get the engine first and then everything else second. To be honest, that's sort of Yamaha's whole ethos. They make great engines and just shove them into kind of meh chassis. The CP2 engine was a revelation in the industry. You could argue that it is one of the motors that defined the last decade. It's a 689cc parallel twin that debuted in 2013 and has stayed the same unchanged, making 73 horsepower and 50 foot-pounds of torque. Before this engine hit the scene, parallel twins were notoriously uninspiring, mostly flat, lawnmower-like 180-degree twins like the one found in Kawasaki's Ninja 650. The CP2's 270-degree crank design with power pulses every 270 degrees of rotation creates an uneven firing order that's more spiritually similar to a V-twin. And this was a revolutionary moment for the once slept-on parallel twin, because now not only could you get a svelte, compact 2-cylinder engine, you could have one that sounded good and made good power too. Now, compared to the predecessor like the FC6, which was a middleweight bike that used a D-tune inline 4, the MT07 made power and torque right off idle. And this became the defining trait of the category, low-end punch that made everyday riding fun all the time, not just at Redline. But like I said, this bike was engine first, so naturally there were some trade-offs. Meeting the accessible price point was crucial for the success of the platform, and the MT07 was notoriously compromised just about everywhere else. The suspension was soft and uninspiring. I mean, it used a conventional right-side-up fork right until the most recent update in 2025. I mean, that's borderline criminal for the time period. The brakes worked, but in that classic on-off bargain bin type of way, because the MT07 was never built for precision. It was all about cheap fun. And despite these glaring limitations, it was successful nonetheless. They've sold tens of thousands of these things because it was such a fun experience. Now, riders would happily turn the other cheek and just disregard its shortcomings. Myself included. I've reviewed plenty of these motorcycles throughout my tenure here on YouTube, and I always thought the same thing. These things are great, but they're a little sloppy. But that's because nothing else in the category really executed what Yamaha was able to accomplish with the MT07. It was a little rough around the edges, but it was light, rowdy, and by most metrics, dirt cheap. The CP2 is such a robust engine that an MT07 will survive countless owners and whatever mechanical torment that they may be subjected to, meaning baby squids everywhere could get a hand-me-down MT07 for peanuts. Since we're on the topic, what's the best one to buy? Should you get a brand new one chock full of updates, or get a raw-edged OG from the FZ days? Now, some bikes get hefty updates every few years to stay relevant. The MT07, that didn't really happen to it. But to be fair, it didn't really need it. It was so uncontested for so long, what was the point in an update? Any meaningful changes would just necessitate a price increase, and the super low price point was a crucial piece to this bike's puzzle. When it first came out in 2014, it was called the FZ07 here in America, and as I mentioned, it was a great engine with cheap everything else. If you were to ride an MT07 at its limits, which wasn't particularly high, it wouldn't be particularly confidence-inspiring either. But it didn't matter, because you weren't really meant to ride the MT07 like a sport bike. You know, in that typical way of pinging off the limiter on the side of the tire in tight corners. It was meant to party from stoplight to stoplight. Whack the throttle wide open and just feel the front wheel lift as you pull away from traffic. Its crude construction was part of the charm. It felt almost toy-like, encouraging you to play with it without fearing damage or serious repercussions. Although, I wonder how many of these poor bikes have been looped by squids who did not have the skills to pay the bills. Drop me a comment down below if you've looped an MT07. I think even Jigsaw has. When Yamaha relaunched the family of bikes as the Master of Torque series, the FZ07 became the MT07 here in America and saw some styling updates. But fundamentally, it was the same bike, inheriting both the good and the bad. But eventually, as competition popped up, the MT07 started to look really long in the tooth. Other companies were able to make bikes that made better power, had better components, and more features. So Yamaha was left with no choice but to update the living fossil. For the 2025 model year, the MT07 finally received a long overdue tech update. It got ride-by-wire throttle with traction control and ride mode selectable via the TFT display, and maybe most importantly, it received updated KYB suspension, which absolutely solved for that kind of soft, wallowy feeling that FZs were known for. Now, interestingly, Yamaha also began to sell the MT07 with an optional automatic transmission similar to Honda's DCT system, but was it all a little too late? Because the 2025 update wasn't a total overhaul, it was just a necessary correction. It didn't reinvent the platform, it just kind of brought it to where it needed to be to stay relevant. Now, in my opinion, if you're a very budget-conscious buyer, a used MT07 is still a really solid buy. Spend about $5,000 cash and you can get one that will churn miles for a long time. And you'll still get the core experience because it didn't change them for very long, but you'll still have to tolerate the lackluster suspension and the LCD calculator screen for a dash. I believe if you find a good deal, you won't be missing the updates. But on the other hand, if you wanted to purchase an MT07 brand new, there are so many bikes in the category now that didn't even exist in the MT's heyday. I mean, this thing was uncontested for like 10 years.
For 2026, we mixed it up a little bit. No more middleweight sport bikes. This Aprilia 210 V4 Factory is our newest giveaway motorcycle, and it is truly a spicy little meatball. Listen to that thing. Head over to the website, become a member for your best chance to win. Now, if you'll excuse me, you can get back to watching the video. I'm going to take this thing for a ride.
The MT07 is not the default middleweight anymore. So, what are the other motorcycles that give it a run for its money or surpass it entirely? I'm of the belief that the Honda Hornet CB750 is the new benchmark in this category. Honda really took their time putting together an MT07 competitor, and it shows because nothing good comes fast. In many ways, the CB750 excels beyond an MT07. It uses a 755cc parallel twin that makes 90 horsepower, which is quite a jump on the Yamaha CP2 engine. The Honda motor has the same punchy low-down torque, but it revs out much more spiritedly to redline. It manages to achieve a fantastic balance between immediate grunt and rewarding top end. But unlike Yamaha, Honda didn't phone it in after building the engine. It has good suspension, a comprehensive tech package, a quick shifter, and it just manages to feel more premium while also providing better value and not compromising on the fun factor. The Hornet's essentially what the MT07 should have become if Yamaha didn't coast on it for a decade. But I will say, the MT07 does have spin-forged wheels, and it is much lighter weight than the CB750, and you do feel it. The MT07 feels basically weightless. It's one of the party tricks it has, along with its short wheelbase. Now then you've got the Suzuki GSX 8S that followed the exact same formula. It has a 776cc parallel twin with a 270 crank, making 83 horsepower and 58 foot-pounds of torque. Can we be honest, what's Kawasaki doing in this space? We need to complete the four horsemen of the new parallel twin UJM apocalypse. The GSX 8S is born from the same design brief of the MT07, but it accomplishes it with a different personality. The MT07 is twitchy and chaotic and short wheelbase and lightweight and kind of crazy. The GSX 8S is more planted thanks to its longer wheelbase and higher weight. It's still fun, but it doesn't kind of egg you on to misbehave like the previous bikes do. it feels a bit more mature but lacking the spark that makes the original MT07 so lovable in the first place. Now, one of the most interesting alternatives is the Triumph Trident 660. The 660 is by far the most complete motorcycle in the category. It uses a 3-cylinder engine that makes nearly 95 horsepower now, which is kind of a lot for a middleweight bike in this kind of lower end of the category. Remember, the MT07 only made 75 when it debuted, and all these bikes are making like 90 now. The triple is also a really nice contrast to the parallel twins that have become so prevalent in this category. You still get that strong mid-range, but with the ability to rev it out way more freely. And it's also one of the most premium motorcycles in the category. It uses an IMU to control the rider raise, which is not really something you see in this price range. None of the other bikes I mentioned have it. It also has more suspension adjustability and an advanced tech package, but it doesn't quite have the hooligan energy of the MT07, which for some riders might be a plus. The MT07 elicits kind of that playful, nearly supermoto style energy, while the Trident is more of like a neo-retro roadster naked bike. So if you like round headlights, go with this one. I think the Trident is a little more composed and less chaotic, and if that sounds up your alley, then the Triumph may be a worthy contender. Then there is the Z650, which I didn't even want to include, but I do feel obligated to as something of a cautionary tale. The Z650 is the naked bike variant of the Ninja 650 platform. Both use Kawasaki's very flat and uninspiring 180-degree twin that sounds bad stock, and even worse, with a pipe. It doesn't have a lot of character or charm. It feels super plasticky and old school. It's like a lawnmower had a baby with a washing machine. It looks incredibly distasteful to my senses, and even though they've updated it with good stuff like a quick shifter and the TFT, those are still optional extras. And it just feels really last gen by comparison. I mean, we were talking about how the MT07 is kind of last gen before they updated it. This is what the parallel twin used to be, and by comparison to an MT07 and a Hornet, it just does not cut it at all anymore. I don't think you should look at this bike or consider it whatsoever. If anyone's bought a Z650 after riding an MT07, a Trident, or a Hornet, drop me a comment down below. Who hurt you? Why did you do that? That doesn't make any sense. So the SV650 from Suzuki is still hanging around too. I guess it's sold brand new in the United States despite the development of the 8S platform and being discontinued in Europe. And while we all love the SV, it's kind of hard to justify buying one brand new. Paying 2026 prices for a 2017 bike is pretty crazy. There are still some gems in the used market, but it's so hit or miss, it can be hard to outright recommend. Some used bikes are simultaneously overpriced and also rode hard and put away wet, but others are super clean and also priced well, so it's a case-by-case basis. The SV650 is great, but it's not the default anymore. Now, lastly, Yamaha sells a sibling to the MT07, the XSR 700. This bike is fundamentally based on the last-gen MT07 in a neo-retro reskin. It's got a different seat, a gas tank, but essentially a classier-looking MT07 without the updates. It's still using the old right-side-up fork, simple LCD dash, and cable throttle, but if you find a good deal on a used XSR, I say go for it. But brand new, you're better off with something like the Trident 660 to get that kind of hybrid roadster naked bike experience. If you're on a budget and you want to maximize value, a used MT07 will serve you very, very well. If you want a little bit more upmarket experience, save up a few $1,000s and check out a CB750 Hornet, because it's a bike that will hold your attention for longer than the MT07. And now that it's sold with the e-clutch system, it brings over any rider who is interested in the automatic MT07. So, after all that, who should buy an MT07? The answer used to simply be everyone. I mean, I could think of anybody that would enjoy an MT07. But today, it's not as cut and dry. The MT07 still makes a ton of sense for the right rider. If you're newer, looking for a first or second bike to rip around town and learn how to ride without getting too bored of a 400, the MT07 delivers. It's a bike that will encourage you to keep riding thanks to its playful nature. You don't need to go 100 miles an hour to enjoy it. You don't need ultra precise cornering techniques to keep up. You just need a CP2, an Icon helmet, and a 360 camera to capture your second gear power wheelies. There's a reason so many people have fallen in love with the MT07. Its character overshadows its imperfection. It is greater than the sum of its parts. Even with the updates, it's not the category leader. It's not as composed as the Trident. It's not as complete as the Hornet, yet it endures. A clean used MT07 is still one of the best bang for bucks you can get in motorcycling. Yamaha made a bajillion of these. They're cheap, they're everywhere, they're easy to maintain, and reliable as hell. I mean, basically nothing goes wrong with these bikes. An MT07 with 30,000 miles is barely broken in. This is gonna just churn miles forever. Change the oil, put it away wet, doesn't really matter. Now, it's not the most powerful, it's not the most advanced, but it'll still make you laugh inside your helmet, and I think that's worth paying for. It used to be the default choice, now it's the one you have to choose on purpose. And if you ask me, I think it's still a pretty sweet ride. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, we have many more like it, so go and check those out on my channel. I appreciate you checking out the video. I will catch you on the next one. If you want to watch more about the MT07, we had one last year as a giveaway bike. Go back in the catalog and search Yami Noob MT07 to see all the good videos I've made on that. Catch you on the next one. See you later.